power systems. We have seen literal systems where hospitals have been torn down because they were working too well. Alternative healing hospitals. They get torn down because it's decentralized. Heaven forbid we take power into our own hands. However, if it's done in the right way, with the right structures, and you get enough people but not too many people doing the right thing but not too out there, you can kind of find a happy medium. If we can create a model like that, and I believe those models are all over the place, they just haven't hit critical mass then, bang, I think we're going to have a solution. I really, really do. You want to ask a question?
One model of resistance.
Leaderless
resistance, yeah.
Okay.
Where everybody has the information and it's not concentrated in it.
Right,
I think Occupy's Wall Street's working along those lines.
Like a cell, almost like cell, operated almost like cell groups.
I haven't gone into it deeply, but...
Yeah. Different people. And it's almost like if we do get together on a united front, it shouldn't be a be-all or end-all. It shouldn't stop you from doing what you would have done anyway. In other words, what I'm saying is, don't stop the learning curve. Don't stop doing your own things. Don't stop this whole movement, because you might not entirely agree with what we're doing, but you might have your own ideas. So the whole idea is when we get enough people, critical mass, just awakening to this information that I've given you guys today. Now bear in mind, ordinarily, I mean, I just can't believe how you guys have absorbed this. I'm quite amazed. I really, normally, just to convince people that money's made out of nothing, the first hour of this presentation can take me an entire day, and they still don't get it. So either you guys are very special, or there's an awakening of something, consciousness.
Cape Town, baby.
Yeah, okay, so there's something. Huh? Okay.
Looking at the positive side and as to where one could go, traditionally one usually goes to a banking institution or some institution, cap in hand, excuse me boss, can I have some money for my house, to buy a house? And it's very much, they call all the shots. My thought was, if one could get enough people with a critical mass, as it were, and that we turn the things around and we go to the banks and say, we want you to do us the favor of lending, we will give you the opportunity to lend us money, and these are the terms and conditions on which we will borrow. Now, obviously it's not going to work initially, but if there was such a document and it started becoming publicly available and the critical mass came along, and it would, in a reverse situation, draw attention to how unfair the present mortgage agreements are, at least I feel that is a positive way to, sure, the first few times they'll laugh at you, but the moment you've got banks, and now you get banks competing, and you might suddenly find one bank will look at this and say, well, maybe.
Look, it's possible. My suggestion with that is draft the documents and then we'll send them out to our database.
Yeah.
Seriously, that's the beauty. I mean, New Economic Rights Alliance has now got, we're sitting on about 80,000 supporters now on our database and growing quite rapidly. So, we're growing quickly, which is nice. So these ideas can be put forward. They're just going to get, obviously get approval, etc., and everyone agrees with it, then we do it. So these kind of ideas, if you've got them, put them in action and we can support them, like CES, like this alternative currency. It's fantastic because they've done it. So if it's there and operating, let's use it. Let's do it. Let's just keep going. My honest opinion of the system is that the system itself is just, I don't think it can be fixed because I think it's inherently flawed. The geometry is wrong. And I could be wrong. Maybe it is technically a good system and it's just been corrupted. I personally don't really believe that. I think it's inherently flawed.
And the reserve system is impossible.
The whole thing, yeah, the whole money system and the whole way. And I think the only solution is decentralized communities. And that's happened. There are stories about where small little communities have actually created their own currencies used internally. It's happened on a truly community scale, like Findhorn, Damanhur, a whole lot of the sustainable communities have actually got alternative currencies that they use. There's also other ones that they use, little markets that they use, where there was I saw it on TV the other day where I think it was a small village in Greece. When you go to market, you don't trade with their money. They literally go to a computer and you get issued currency and it all works and da-da-da-da. It's very cool. And it's interesting because it means people with nothing don't have nothing. You can still get. That is powerful. If a system allows somebody who has nothing access to the system to authentically provide something and immediately be able to get something out of it. Isn't that the way that we should be? Right now, if you've got nothing, you stay nothing unless you steal it.
They're empowering systems rather than disempowering systems.
Exactly, yeah. And we are in a disempowering system. And it seriously, it goes deep. I mean, I wanted to also talk to you about trusts. When you start looking about how trusts work, and you start getting into you start seeing the system very differently. Because the concept of a trust is very simple. If I go off to war, I entrust a property to a friend who can then look after it for me so my son can inherit it if anything ever happens to me. So now these trusts have started to be created, and there's a whole legal system and many different types of trusts. But what's really interesting when you start looking at some interesting, and again, now I'm starting to get into a little bit more of the stuff, and I guess you could call it conspiracy theories kind of stuff. But you start looking at these acts. There was apparently an act called the Sister-Q Trust Act of the year of the Great Fire, 1666, I think it was, during the Great Fire of London, which was passed, which effectively declared everybody dead. So what effectively happened was the so-called lawmaker, and it's very closely linked to canon law, which itself is weird. If you want to see weird stuff, go and investigate like canon law. It's just strange. But essentially what would happen is that everyone was declared dead. And because everyone was declared dead, entities are now created in their stead. So you and I and everybody else are dead. Therefore, the trust, everything that we have which was in trust, now falls as property of the state by default. So now what happens is instead of getting a community of people, we now have an electorate of civilians. Now, if you do yourself a favor, and I mean, how much of you, or citizens, put your hand up if you're a South African citizen. I love it when everyone puts their hand up, or most people. Really, so you'll put your hand up, eh? So, good, everyone put your hand up. So, please can you give me the definition of a citizen? Clearly you must know what it is, seeing as you put your hand up.
It's a person who's got constitutional rights.
No? Anyone else?
You're an asset of human being.
Yeah, but why? What is...
Your signature.
Huh? The definition of a citizen.
Your birth.
Your birth is registered and you become a citizen of that ship. We fall under admiral law.
Okay. That's also
So
true.
therefore, your name is put in capital letters. We actually have no rights.
We have no
No
rights.
rights.
Now, but why don't we have any rights? The very simple definition of a citizen. Do you know what a citizen is? All of you put your hand up. A citizen is somebody who pledges their allegiance to the state in exchange for benefits and privileges. What have I just said?
Something we didn't do.
You've just pledged your allegiance. If you go join the army and you pledged your allegiance to the United States of America, what have you done with your rights? You've given them all away. And in return you get benefits and privileges.
Nothing.
So the concept is, as the theory goes is that we no longer have any rights whatsoever. We've given them up because we're all dead. We've been replaced by corporate entities. Each one of us is a corporation. Have you ever wondered how a person can go bankrupt? If you're not a bank, how can a non-bank go bankrupt? So is it theoretically possible that we are actually all banks? So actually what happened was we declared dead. We were then incorporated, so a legal corporation, a juristic person was created. If you look up person in the dictionary, you'll see a person can mean IBM. IBM is a person. Microsoft is a person. The city of Cape Town is a person. And a person has exactly the same rights as a real living being, supposedly. It can sue, it can be sued, etc., etc. It's a juristic person or a juristic entity. So, we've given all our rights away. Okay, we've pledged allegiance to the state in return for benefits and privileges, which means we are always perpetually having our cap in hand going, please can I have another benefit and privilege. Just because we call it a right doesn't mean it's a right. A right is something that you're born with. We've happily given that right away. Now, we've mentioned the birth certificate. Certificate of what? Certificate of incorporation. Do you need signatures to open a company? You do, hey? And what is a signature and evidence of? I've shown you. Remember bills of exchange, negotiable instruments? A signature. What does it represent? Money. So is it possible that the certificate of incorporation actually represents a negotiable instrument that can be traded? Is it theoretically possible? So what are we doing to our children by registering them? Register. Regis. Where does the word regis come from? King, to the crown. So who are we actually pledging our allegiance to? Who are we handing over this property to? Is it not property? It's a property, isn't it? Now think about it. When you get married, do you need to have a license to get married?
Yes.
What the hell is that about? What on earth would you need a license to get married? The only reason that you would need to be a license is because you're about to do something or produce something that the state has an interest in. What is a marriage producing that the state could possibly want an interest in? Children, exactly. So you then register them, hand them over to Her Majesty, the Crown, and essentially you've now created a bill of exchange or a negotiable instrument that can get traded. What are we traded as when governments go? What is the only collateral governments have to trade with us internationally? Ourselves. So our citizens of a country are evidence of debt. The more citizens you have, and the more, down the line, good-hearted, good-natured, correct citizens doing the right thing they have, the more likely they are to pay their taxes and do all the right things, which means it's good business to invest in them. So that's why you go and you loan against them. It makes sense, doesn't it, if you think about it? It sounds out there, but it kind of does have a ring of truth, yeah?
Your case that you presented so far is not going to be furthered by this, like, really on-the-edge stuff.
That's exactly why I gave you guys a disclaimer beforehand. I told you all up front that I'm going into this now, and I wanted to just make it clear.
You can say what you can say, but it's a very anarchist position. And I don't know if you have contemplated what it would be like to live without laws, governments, public services, etc. I think one must be careful where you go with this.
Can I answer this?
Yeah.
The impression that society gives is that without laws, governments, and institutions, there will be a world of everybody's fighting for whatever meager food or whatever's on the table. I mean, I've got kids right now. Property 15, 20 years ago was 5,000 rand for a house. It's now 500,000 rand. In 10, 20 years' time, it's going to be 500 million or whatever.
Yeah,
I mean, this is the future. So when people say, what's a society without laws and rules, I'm saying the first thing is you've got common law, then you have canon law, high court law, and now we've got constitutional law. Which one do you subscribe to?
And what
Do you
happens if the
agree to
law is
all
not
of this
upheld?
without knowing it? And we go through life not questioning any of this. It makes me, forgive me, I'm a bit angry right now. It's because people just jump on the bandwagon. Forgive me. If we don't have laws, everybody's going to fight with each other. No, I'm sorry, that's number one. I find that deeply offensive and prejudiced because I'm not someone who's just going to go out fighting. And the second one is, if someone doesn't agree with us, this is not the forum for it. You know, you can question. I have no issues with it. But for me right now, I know why he's fighting. Because I asked him the same question.
Sorry, brother, I'm not arguing with his fight. I'm saying just don't push it too far because then it
But
becomes...
this is the truth. This is not lies. This is the truth. This is fact. This is not fact.
I'm just suggesting getting into this radical anarchist thing is not going to further your cause, which I consider a just cause and I agree with. I think that this is pushing it far beyond where most ordinary people are prepared to go. And we're already fighting with each other. Even
Are
with
we
laws,
ordinary
etc.
people?
No, we weren't
And
fighting.
do you know what anarchists
We're all
are?
in agreement. We're all agreement. You're the only one
Some people have
And
got...
this is you're free to leave as well. This is the time now the seminar's finished.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, but I choose not to.
May I say
Well
something?
then, go along with it.
We're not afraid.
Listen, I have the right to disagree because I think it's in the interests of this cause, okay? Don't become a bunch of sheep who believes everything that you're told. I'm just saying, what you're saying now, I don't think is reinforcing what you presented in the rest of the day, most of which I agree with, and I think it's important. It just gets to a point where a lot of people aren't going to listen because it's just going too far in terms of...
He's talking now to an alternative crowd who are sitting here willing to go beyond the call of duty. And
we're into that realm where we will do anything bar murder. Yeah, it takes.
Listen, the right state is the only thing that prevents the people who you're arguing with from just taking
I agree.
It's difficult stuff to hear.
I'm arguing.
Can I just say a good illustration was that picture where all the cattle are in a row and they're just being pumped on the forehead and all the rest of it. We can either choose to become aware and allow our consciousness to take in information that might seem too extreme and alternative to you or to respect to you. But at the end of the day, we are all sitting here as intelligent human beings and leaving our consciousness open to this experience. And everything that's been said here has logic to it. It makes sense. And at the end of the day, as you rightly pointed out, you have the choice of your opinion. I would like to thank Scott. Thank you so much. And Judy, because you're right. She's always just creating the basis for the spectacular to happen. But, you know, whether somebody agrees or doesn't agree, it's been shared, and it hits your consciousness, and how you choose to take that message. That's totally on you. That's your journey, as is each of our journey. And I just have an appreciation for today. So thank you to all of you, and thank you, Scott and Judy.
Thank you very much. I understand exactly what you're saying. From a New Economic Rights Alliance perspective, that ended a while ago. That's why I made it very clear. From a New Economic Rights Alliance, we play by the rules. We do it within the system, and we play in that game. And then that's why I said afterwards, I specifically said, you know, that's what the New Economic Rights Alliance is about. And from that entity's perspective, and as a non-profit organization, that's exactly where we're going with this. We're not going to bring any of the Freeman stuff. We're not going to talk about, you know, making money out of nothing, and we're not going to talk about the fact that we don't belong in court because we're not the entity that we say we are. We're not a ward of the state, etc., etc. That's not what it's about. From a New Economic Rights Alliance perspective, that is going to be done by the book. And proper South African law to back it up. And believe me, there is more than enough research and more than enough information that we need to take on the banks in that realm. No problem. I firmly believe that. We've done incredible research. And the guys and the team and everyone is just phenomenal. What we're talking about now, as I said, is that there's a good chance, a real chance, that it's not going to work or it's going to take too long. So for me to start having these discussions with you guys after I've made it clear that this is now very separate, it's really just about starting to understand and how we can start looking at alternatives and to start saying what's really going on. And apart from that, I did tell you that you guys would go on a ride tonight, and I don't want to completely let you down. I mean, there's at least one lawyer here today who I have huge respect for, and he's still here today, and he's still here listening. And he's done some amazing stuff in the court, and he's also fighting one hell of a fight, and he's absolutely brilliant. And he's still here, so clearly there must be something going on. So, you know,
who's the lawyer?
He can put up his hand if he wants to. He's doing absolutely brilliant stuff and following the proper court procedures to do it. And believe you me, I've gone through those. We started researching them, going through it. It's difficult stuff, eh? It's a very difficult fight. But what's also interesting is, for me, is that this kind of information about the fact that is it theoretically possible that we are instruments of our own demise, or more correctly, debt instruments of our own demise. Is it not worthwhile to start understanding this information, because it might, just might, give us an edge to start motivating us in a way that we might not have been motivated without this knowledge. It really hammered home. I'm telling you, Hugh, when I started actually thinking about the possibility that my name wasn't actually me, just and researching it, and if you actually start going into the history, there's a very interesting concept. In fact, if you the Muslims have a concept of a wakif. I don't know if I pronounce it correctly. I don't know how to pronounce it. W-A-K-F. I think it's actually pronounced wakif, and it's like almost like a religious cause, but it's an ownership structure. And the same structure also existed in Roman times, and it was Latin, and it was called Pie Causae. I don't know how to pronounce it. P-A-I-E, I think, Causae, C-A-U-S-E. Pious cause, you know, pious as in religious. Now what it meant was that you were not a juristic entity. You could actually own property without having it to be put into this entity, a juristic entity, if it was for a religious reason. It was a different ownership structure. And when I was studying this, it was almost as if this concept of the Pierre Corset, this ownership of land structure, was somehow separate from the citizen's right to property. And when you learn, it's almost like in order to see it, you can never see a black hole, but you can see light going into it. The same thing happened with studying this and going into the history. It was this: you can't prove that we are incorporated as juristic entities, that we have a corporation attached to us, but it severely implies that existed, because there were entities that were created that didn't subscribe to it. And that got repealed, I don't know, like the 1700s or something like that. But you start asking serious questions about what was really going on. So what essentially happened, and you can read this in Black's Law Dictionary, the Romans had 3 different types of people. They had capitis diminutia minima, capitis diminutia media, and capitis diminutia maxima. And to this day, if you're capitis diminutia media, it means you've only lost medium loss of rights. And the late Dr. Johann Joubert, a good friend of mine, had diplomatic status, because that's what it is, it's given to diplomats. And half his name was in capital letters and half of it wasn't in capital letters. Weird. Okay, now, in the Sister Q Trust Act, apparently, that when we all declared dead, have you ever noticed tombstones, how they write your name? When you see your name on a tombstone, it's always in capital letters. So this concept that we were essentially declared dead and then reincorporated, and I do agree with the guy behind in the back there. It's out there stuff. It really, really is. The concept though, that we are somehow devoid of rights when we are born, and those rights have been secretly through a contract which we weren't even party of because we were too young to know, has somehow, this agreement has circumvented our rights. So we are now fighting for rights which are actually benefits and privileges that we should already have at birth. Yes?
Scott, you know what I find really frustrating, and to address the gentleman whilst I understand what he's saying as well, what I find extremely frustrating, besides our rights having been taken away, or also we're supposed to be living in a democracy, which is the biggest joke, because, and when I listen to the radio, and it's supposed to be an intelligent radio station, Cape Talk or 702, and I hear people saying the government must do, the government must take charge, and I'm saying, for God's sake, you've fought for democracy, and now you want the government to take your freedom. And what's really worrying me with this whole thing with Interlini and Robin Carlyle and our DA's sort of story is that they're supporting it, and what's really worrying me now is that I heard Robin Carlyle say that they're going to be doing a recall on all our driver's licenses.
Yes, that's right.
You won't be able to get any insurance, etc., etc. And then the other thing is also...
Did you hear that, by the way, guys?
What?
Your driver's license will have to be rekeyed.
You're going to
What's
you
that?
won't get insurance unless you RECA. So you
What's the
like
RECA?
it with the bank, exactly like with the bank and the telephones. And the other thing is they're talking about the smoking laws, that you're not allowed to smoke in your car, which is cool if you've got a little kid in it. They're now looking at you're not allowed to smoke in your own... Well, they're looking at you're not allowed to smoke in your own home. So who's going to be telling on you? The radio station's already saying, and Robin Carlyle is already saying, do the right thing, report whoever. And that's my problem. That is my problem.
Well, in America, there's a whole thing about how the Boy Scouts operate and how, I've literally seen clips of people going into schools and they're educating school kids to say, if you see your parents doing this or this or this or this or this, you must tell them what's going on. Yeah, it is. It's correct. Germany may have lost the war in World War II, but they seem to definitely be on the upper hand when it comes to a financial system. And it's interesting though, and please don't take that wrong. I don't mean that from a Nazi perspective whatsoever. I'm just saying that there's an intelligence behind what's going on. And I don't know what that is. And here I am just completely speculating with you in terms of that. I can tell you, though, that it says, if you start reading the dictionary, that the Romans had 3 different types of people. Capitis diminution maxima, maximum loss of rights, slaves. Capitis diminution media, and capitis diminutia maxima media, and minima, minimum loss of rights. So they had these 3 categories of people. It's not conspiracy theory, it's in. You can go and read up on it and it's there. The question is, how are these different people treated and why? You can look up the definition of person. And it even gets weirder because the only time that Black's Law Dictionary is this thick, but it doesn't have a definition of human being. You have to go back to Ballantyne's dictionary of 1930-something, and then you'll find, or 1940-something, and then you find a definition of human being. It says C-S-E-E, monster. Now, hey, you take this as you want. Go check it out yourself. I find it absolutely fascinating. It's really, I find it really interesting. But this is the kind of thing. But you start asking questions. Why are we treated like absolute slaves? Why are we treated like complete and utter idiots? If we're good slaves, then yeah, we don't get the armed forces coming after us. And when I mean by the armed forces, I'm saying anything that is enforcing a law, because you have law enforcement, which is the force of law versus law. Like I said, a rhino's mother does not need any enforcement to come after anyone who comes after her baby rhino. Okay? But in our society, there is this whole police, military type force, sheriffs, etc., that are there to enforce law. So you have the force of law. So my question also to the gentleman at the back is we need to ask ourselves a fundamental question, and what is law? And is it theoretically possible that laws are divided into different categories? And where is the law that says we have to obey all laws?
Maybe I can say something to that.
Yeah.
I think first of all you need to distinguish between human rights and socioeconomic rights. I think you also need to realize there's good laws and bad laws, and good governance and bad governance. One of the biggest problems is that democratic governments cannot function on behalf of citizens because of control by private financial interests. That's a massive problem, because government should represent citizens, and the major principle in a rights life is equality. But there isn't equality. What you're saying about different classes is absolutely true in socioeconomic terms. Especially, I understand that money is rights. You have a lot of money, you have a lot more rights to the resources in society than anyone else. You have no money, you have the right to die, to starve, whatever. So I think we have to just not write off the possibility, also because at present people tend to be egotistical to the extent where this ideal of social cooperation without any law, without any government, etc. It's a wonderful ideal, but unfortunately we're not. Maybe you are, but many people, most people, are probably not ready to live in that kind of society. I think what we need is more democratic governments, more just laws, more active citizen participation in order to bring about a more equitable situation. And government is the only place where power can be taken back from these private financial interests and the 1%
look,
elite.
I mean, the whole concept of bringing currency creation back to governments is a possibility that we can look at. Like I said, I'm not here to argue the political side of that. That's not what I want to do, but it's a point it's definitely a viable solution. Give government the right to print money. Thanks, Tim. Why are we in a situation where we have to borrow our money? Why can't we just create it ourselves? And that's a question that very few people have been able to answer. So yes, I mean, there's many. I mean, in terms of the role of government, etc., etc. But again, you know, what is the right? And you kept saying we need more democratic government, we need more just laws. We keep hearing more. We've got how many? 5,000, 6,000 statutes. There's 5,000 or 6,000 more, 8,000 acts of parliament. But now we want more just laws.
The other function of government is redistribution. If there weren't taxes paid and that money redistributed, I can tell you half this country would be starving.
I think it is, isn't it? Half the country is starving.
You know how many poor people live on old age pensions and child support grants? Yeah. Just do your homework before you write off government and taxation.
But I've never written off government.
But it sounds like it, because that's the anarchist position.
Why do you say anarchist? I've never. It's almost like you're trying to make me out to be someone I'm not.
Yeah.
No, because I hear
I've never said I'm an anarchist.
Story, you know,
But that's the truth, though. That's the truth.
What are you talking about?
Why
With
do
all
you
due respect, dude, come on, man. I've never said I'm an anarchist. I don't even believe in that. I've just specifically said that as the head of the New Economic Rights Alliance, which is a duly registered non-profit organization, we are doing everything with regards to South African law. We are backing it up with South African law. We're going through the South African courts. We're doing everything that we can to focus on that element of it. We're going to play by every single rule and do it all as correctly as possible with very little money on the bones of our arse, and we're going to try and do those changes that you're talking about. I've made that clear. What part of that makes me an anarchist?
Sorry, I must just say something at this point. I really have to say something at this point. You've got such faith in government, the system, the status quo, can't buck it at all. We haven't even got time to let them carry on, because I can tell you something, we're running out of water right this moment. We'll be completely out of water by 2020. By 2016 it'll be dire. We've got a government who's putting some electric new coal-fired power stations which uses 320 million cubes of water per year, and nuclear, which we know which is going to be a disaster, and they're storing all the nuclear waste on site. We've got this fish running out, fish out of the sea going at top speed. if this is not a time to pussyfoot around and say let's try and stick with the system. This is a time for anarchists. If the system is doing what it's doing now, we haven't got the time now. We've allowed it too much slack already. And if we hadn't allowed the slack, we might have a better chance. At this moment, we've got a hair's breadth of a chance of somehow trying to pull the system right and trying to change away from an absolute disaster. And if we haven't even got, I reckon these next 6 months are the key 6 months. I'm hoping that the change that we're going to see during the next 6 months will bring us into the golden age. I believe there is going to be a change. I just can't see exactly how, but it's time to be an anarchist. If the system is out of sorts, lose it.
Yeah. She's an anarchist. Yeah, sorry, you were first and then you.
To somebody else thinking differently, it's contributionism. It's a society of contributing people who are all geared towards one idea. And Scott, you mentioned that other meetings like this or other workshops, your first hour is going to be really difficult. And are we all just special? I agree, we are special. Or is there a new awakening? I think there is an awakening. I think the idea of being a human being is in the past we lived outside ourselves and within these laws and within the slave-driven society and all the rest of it. And I think more and more of us are going inwardly. I think the journey is now inward. And when you go inwardly and you're on your path to awakening or enlightenment as a human being, you are filled with love, you are filled with compassion, you are filled with purity of spirit. And I get a sense of that stronger and stronger every day. Every time I attend a gathering, there seems to be that element that is just so strong, and you can feel that energy in the air. And I think that's what manifests gatherings like this. It might sound out there, but it's true. That's what gives us the level in our own consciousness to be able to hear information, whether we agree with it or not, or whether we take a percentage of it and we are more committed to one idea of it or the other. The point is that we give each other enough respect as human beings or as beings to hear each other out and say, okay, well, that's a positive thing that I can take hold of or I can grasp on. And when you have the idea of you're outside greed and you want to be somebody who lives within contributionism, you have the idea of sharing and you have the idea of listening, whether you agree or not, listening to hear what is it that I can take away positive from that. You can disagree with whatever's been said, but don't make it about if I choose not to live within a government or society or socioeconomic this or that I'm an anarchist, because it's a rare statement to say yes I am, but at the end of the day that doesn't label me as an anarchist. It labels me as
I don't want to label anyone, so let me withdraw the anarchist thing. But I think people are getting me wrong. I agree with 90% of what you've said and what Judy said and what Scott has said. That's not the point I'm making. And I appreciate idealism. I think it's very important. And I myself am an idealist. I think the point I'm making is don't push idealism too far where it sounds unrealistic to people. You've got to be realistic and strategic if you want to further these causes and not become in a position where people see you as wacky, out of the park, etc. And that very easily happens because it's exciting. No one gets carried away. And I'm not saying we don't need the excitement, etc. But I'm just saying don't push it too far because it actually damages the cause.
And I can tell you a year ago.
I don't disagree with you about that kind of thing. I've been for 10 years longer. That's not the issue. And I'm not disagreeing with fundamentals of that nature. I'm just concerned that and you rightly separated that from what you said before.
Okay.
But I think there comes a point where it goes down okay in this audience, but a lot of people out there who should become part of this movement won't come in if it sounds suspect.
If they're not ready to, they won't.
Yeah. Fair point.
When you've woken up, you'll be here.
This gentleman
and
has
that's
been
the whole
dying
point.
to ask a question.
I've spent more or less 10 years working with words. I'm a wordsmith artist.
Cunning linguist.
Yeah. Amongst other things. I rap as a poet, as a performer as well. In my research, because it is a form of research, it's led me into many avenues, including studying the money system, observing day-to-day life, questioning. And it dawned on me at some point the distinction or the clarification of this mechanism of word language, it being the crux of how our laws, marketing, banking, money systems, the way we communicate is all using word language. And it suddenly, it was a moment of clarity where I realized, geez, how is it that I could overlook that one thing, that one simple thing, that the key thing to all of this is this thing of word language. And if in that insight I realized, okay, is that not the starting point from which to, the heart of the issue, from which to then get everyone on the same page and realize historically, if we look at all of the events of the past, where we are now, has it not happened because of, theoretically, this thing of word language?
Yeah.
And if that is the case, is that not the starting point from which to then get everyone on the same page and then work backwards?
Yeah, that's such an interesting point. I mean, I talked about the way words are used in legal terms versus normal terms, and really well done. It's a wonderful question. Yeah, definitely. Now, let me ask you a question. Have you studied David Wood-Miller's information? Quantum language.
I've tried to actually... I haven't, sorry.
Okay. Has anyone watched quantum language? Some of them. What? David Wood-Miller. He's an American guy, quantum language. Now, it's important because that guy behind again, what's your name, by the way? John. What John mentioned is important because David Wood-Miller is also the kind of guy that is absolute genius. Absolutely flippin' brilliant. And every now and again he makes a statement that completely and utterly makes you go, huh? And loses credibility. And I think that's exactly what you're saying. It's very easy for you to do some brilliant stuff and then come up with stuff that just totally collapses everything that you've said. And I fully appreciate that. Another guy to look after, that's David Wood-Miller, and it's called Quantum Language. And it's brilliant. It is. He does this thing, and he talks about language and how language has got a code, and how he's broken that code, and how, for example, the Queen has only ever used two different types of language. She split specific syntax. So she uses verb, everything, all our contracts are what's called adverb-verb. And he shows you why all our contracts, all the agreements, all the treaties, everything that's ever been done says nothing. It's mathematically designed to say nothing, because none of it's actually real. It's all an illusion in our head. It's brilliant. As a study of language, I think you'll really, really enjoy that, the quantum language stuff.
Is it a book? Or
he's got a book out, but you can go and download his 17-part thing on YouTube as well. It's 17 parts. He's reduced it. Somebody has actually reduced it, that you can download the shortened version. But also on that point, there's a brilliant guy as well called, and this is, again, what John says is very valid, Gene Keating. He's this American guy who is you just listen to the stuff, and it's genius. It's so out there, but he actually shows you where in the Uniform Commercial Code, the Americans use what's called the UCC, the Uniform Commercial Code. And he actually shows you forms that you can fill out to redeem this and get this and this bill of exchange and create money. He actually shows you how to do it. And you sit there and you watch this hours of just absolute genius. And then he just flips and goes, and when Yahweh arrives on the spaceship, which is a planet, which is shielded, he's going to come down and he's going to wipe everyone out, and you're finally going to get judgment. And he's listening to this stuff and you're going to go, exactly. And that's why nobody takes him seriously. And I think that's exactly the point John's trying to make as well. It's very easy to lose it. And David Wood-Miller makes a few statements like that as well. He goes in this brilliant stuff, and then out of the blue he says, I caused the 2008 credit collapse because I sent this document which they didn't understand, which opened a huge hole in the system. And you go, what? Come on. And then he goes back to brilliant stuff again. It's weird. So you have to take everything with a little bit of a pinch of salt before you start getting into it, yeah? David Icke the Reptilians, exactly. Yeah. Again, that he lost huge audiences. Now everybody flocks to see the shape-shifting occurring. Yeah?
The thing that I took from this morning, when the quote from Alka Merkel about the confidence, what you said about trust, I think a lot about what's happening for me is we have to shift our confidence in what is our so-called financial system, and what we're being challenged is to figure out how to have that confidence again in a different way, which we don't even know yet. But that the core of it is we have, in the economic sphere, we're looking at the mutuality of every human being. And that somehow has got to come back into focus. And the government's not going to do it on its own.
No.
It has to somehow come with people putting the human being back in the center.
Yeah, that's such a well put, yeah. Totally agree on that. And for me, that happens with five streams, and the whole point of a sustainable community, because I believe we should decentralize. And someone mentioned it earlier, we can have a decentralized communities whereby you can imagine that, let's say, we're all part of different governments. Imagine South Africa had 100 different governments, and everyone was their own government, for example. And then what would happen is if somebody wronged you, you had, let's say, there was almost like this kind of right that you could work where you could take that person, see which tribe he belonged to, take him back to his tribe, knowing that they'll sort him out. And so everybody has their own way of doing things. I'm just hypothetically speaking here. But this notion of decentralized communities, instead of all trying to become one, maybe in fact we all already are, and it's okay to live in a structure that operates like that. Because you can see certain geographic regions can only hold so many people. So those regions are going to have less people, and other regions are going to have more people. So they're going to be different. There's going to be differences. The way that you build on one piece of land is different to the way you build on another piece of land, because the building materials that are available are different. The thinking is different. We need to start embracing that. But what has happened is the reverse. The creation of the corporation, which was a mistake. I mean, the corporation itself, you guys seen the documentary, The Corporation. The corporation was created because a court reporter somehow misinterpreted a judgment and said, as of this day, it was to do with one of the American amendments. Maybe somebody can update me. But he mistyped the judgment and said, as from now, all corporations are to be treated like people. That was a pivotal time in history. Because now you've got a corporation who acts as a person. Exactly what you said. We now live in a world that is corporate.